If you reflect on it for a moment, you think, what should the purpose of our economy be if it's not our well-being?
Mm-hmm.
And right now, GDP is going to get higher and higher as technology does more and more of us are going to be left behind and depressed and anxious.
Yeah.
And so if you don't get those measurements right, then you wind up in this tug of war that I think many of us are already feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I so appreciate, and that's so true. Like, one of the questions they posed was, the GDP and the economy is doing better than ever, but the real point, is, well,
why doesn't it feel like
what does that mean for real people?
Yeah.
Just because the S&P 500 gained 50 points yesterday, that doesn't affect 90% of the people living in America,
It doesn't. And that's the disconnect, where the top, the 80% of the stock market wealth is held by the top 8% of Americans, to your point.
Right.
So, and the bottom 50% of Americans own essentially zero.
Yeah.
So you're beating people over the head saying stock markets are up, and then people are being like,
what is the stock market even?
Right.
Like for most people, it's like...
Especially if you're young. Because if you're young, I just saw this table that came out that said that the share of wealth for young people is much, much lower than it's been for Gen Xers or certainly boomers. And so if you're a young person with this pile of student loan debt and this tenuous job that doesn't have any benefits and you're barely treading water, like, what does the S&P 500 mean to you?
Yeah, and I think it can only contribute to all the depression, anxiety, because all the time you're hearing on the radio, on the TV, that GDP is great, the economy is great, it's booming, and then meanwhile, if you compare that to how your own life is going, where you can't even live recreationally,
yes,
you're like, dude, what am I doing wrong? Right?
That is the subtext of all of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you were to actually just put out the real measurements saying, hey, we have a student loan debt load that's unprecedented, $1.6 trillion. Mental health is decreasing. Drug addictions at record highs, and you were to put these measurements out, then you would see just how poorly many of our people are doing, and then you'd put energy towards solving those problems. And then if you were doing poorly, you'd be like, oh, I knew it wasn't my imagination, because turns out a lot of us are doing poorly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard to solve a problem if you can't identify it and then establish measurements that help you improve.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the problem, too, with kind of my generation is I feel like the whole generation is kind of stuck in a rut, is that this whole idea of American determinism and self-madeness is like you blame yourself, and also your parents and your elders blame you too, in a way. Maybe
that's the worst part.
They don't explicitly say it right, but you can tell it's like
it's somehow your fault. It's like an attitude problem.
I did it. I made it. What's up? You
Yeah, and
why are you still living with me?
And back when you bought a house, it was freaking, like
$20,000.
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
And you could actually do a part-time job and pay for college, but because college was 30% of the price of what it is now. I'm a numbers guy. We have set up the next generation to fail by the numbers, and the worst part is then we blame them for it. We've been like, hey, it's because your attitude's not right, or like you want everything. And it's really immoral. It's super messed up. I go around the country and I say to young people, I am sorry for the disaster we have left you. And when you think about that message, generally you think, okay, climate change. But it's not just climate change. It's a dysfunctional government that can't solve problems. It's an economy that, by the numbers, is stacked against you. It's the fact that college is 250% more expensive than it was when I went to college. Did it get 250% better? No.
Yeah, certainly not. Not my college.
No one's college cost that's better. And then we've said to the young person, hey, it must be your fault somehow that we've jacked up these prices on you, and then you're going to graduate.
Can't find a job. What's up?
Yeah.
You suck. That's why.
But
and it's not that they suck. It's like, hey, what we've done is we've kicked all of the stable jobs away. Now we're automating them away. And it's much easier to automate away, frankly, an entry-level like insurance agent or job that a college graduate might have done in the past. and now they have the debt, but they don't have the job to come with it. There's a 40 to 44% underemployment rate for recent college graduates right now. So if you are lucky enough to graduate with your debt load, there's almost a 50-50 chance you're going to do a job that didn't require a college degree. And you know where that does not show up? The headline unemployment rate, because they're like, job check, barista, looks good.
Right.
And then they yell at you and being like, unemployment's at record low. And it's like, but my job is like not the job that I was supposed to do out of college.
Right.
Also, I saw on Patriot Act, which saw you on there too, he was just talking about how the elderly are now also not able to really retire in dignity because they also don't have enough savings. And it's crazy because now it's also catching up to the boomer generation who are criticizing us, you know. But
and they have hoarded the most wealth.
Yeah, how are they not able to retire? I don't even understand that. It's like, you guys hoarded the wealth, we're screwed, and now we have to support their old asses.
Well, what happens is they hoarded the wealth, but again, there's massive diversity within that generation. So by share of generational wealth, they have more of it than any other generation. But there are still many, many poor boomers who are going to work until the day they die because they don't have meaningful savings. And that curve gets aggressively worse over time. Where, like, if you look at millennials and project forward, like, no one's going to have any savings.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, my generation, Gen X, is, like, somewhere in between, but not great. And I see this all the time, campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire and Ohio and everywhere else, where senior citizens, how old are your parents?
70.
70.
Yeah. Mine are 79 and 72. And there comes a point when your parents start being very, or at least I'll just speak for myself. There came a time when my parents became very, very cost conscious and judicious.
Oh, that happened a long time
ago. Maybe they were the whole time. But there was a point when talking to my mom in particular, like it started to dawn on me that that their earning power has essentially been determined. They have their kitty of savings and they have passive income and Social Security that they can draw on. And that's it. That defines their economic reality. I've met Americans around the country who have that same reality. And as a young person, or now as a middle-aged person, but certainly when I was a young person, like, it's kind of foreign because you're like, who the heck knows what the future holds? Sky's the limit. Maybe I'll get a raise tomorrow. Like, you don't know. No one knows. But for them, it's like, oh, they know. And because of that, they have this attitude of resource scarcity because they know exactly what's going to come in. And so I've met Americans around the country where they know what's coming in and it's not enough.
Yeah.
Where they have Social Security, and Social Security might be something like $1,000, $1,100 a month, and that's all they have.
That's not enough for anything.
Yeah. So what Hassan said in Patriot Act is right. We have a retiree crisis in this country where senior citizens are going to be working till the day they die, and that retiree crisis just compounds over time. It's pretty wild.
Frightening.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a total shit show for the current millennials or younger
generations. As it gets worse and worse, you know. It's true. I think of my own parents. They own a house that they rent out, and they get a couple $1,000s a month, and that with the Social Security, and I still help them, but they have like a fairly decent source of cash. But when I think of like how hard it is to even buy a house now for our generation, I mean, yeah, I don't see that ending well.
And so many people work on freelance and there's no benefits and no...
Yeah, majority of new jobs are temp gig or contract jobs. All of the benchmarks that you used to associate with a middle-class life are becoming harder and harder to come by. So it used to be, it's like, of course, home ownership. It's like, hey, let's make the real estate crazy expensive. Go to college. Hey, let's make college crazy expensive. And people are getting increasingly distraught because the benchmarks are more and more out of reach, and then we pretend like it's on
all good.
It's on them, and
it's better than it's ever been.
And the numbers are showing up in something, and people have mixed feelings about this. But so every life stage is getting pushed back, and so you're seeing things like marriage decline. You're seeing things like having kids decline. American childbirths are at record lows right now. And so you can look up at that and say, like, well, there are a host of reasons. To me, that's tied into the fact that you don't feel like you have a stable middle class life.
Definitely.
Getting married.
It's a big financial decision to have a kid.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah. And so getting married is in many cases an act of optimism and prosperity. Having kids is an act of optimism and prosperity. And there's just less of it to go around. For young people in particular, where they're trapped in their parents' basement with these debt loads, and they feel like they don't have the stability to be a partner, much less a parent.
Right. And on top of it, they feel like it's their fault.